Yes, love's a secret weapon. Yeah!
Hi, I'm Donna Loren.
And I'm Dr. Adam Gerace.
And you are listening to Love's a Secret Weapon podcast.
In this episode, get on the bus for Dick Clark's 1964 Caravan of Stars Tour, starring Gene Pitney, The Supremes, Brian Hyland, The Crystals, Donna Loren, of course, and many, many more. Then stick around for Donna's chat with her Caravan co-star, Mr. Brian Hyland.
Chapter 7, Wishin and Hopin. June 8, 1964. Rock and Roll TV audition. Shindig. That was an entry in my diary. The regimen I had for going on auditions, and for that matter leaving my house for any reason, was to always be prepared. Therefore, I would spend hours on my makeup and hair. I was naturally an early riser and would usually wake up when it was still dark at around 4:30 in the morning. How unusual that this day was different. I just felt like expressing myself at this audition more like a typical teenager. I modified the amount of eye makeup that I usually applied, skipping one pair of false eyelashes. To get that almond cat eye look I was striving for, I would first add a feathery pair of false eyelashes and trim them with cuticle scissors. Over that layer, I would add a pair of short mink eyelashes to define the shape. My next step was adding black eyeliner over a base of highlighter and finish my upper lid with sable eyeshadow by Max Factor in the upper crevice. That's just the upper lid. I painted eyelashes on the lower lid so that when I added mascara, it appeared to be more natural. On this day, my intuition told me to simplify the whole procedure, but it took me just as long because I was thinking about it the whole time. I was having a conversation with myself about making every decision along the way. Every decision I made affected my entire family as well as the corporation I worked for. On this day, my intuition was loud and clear and assured me there was something new out there for me. I could just feel it. Of course, when it came to my hair, I always had the same procedure. Waking up with my very stiff dippity-dooed turban of hair wrapped in a pink hairnet, I would brush that out and then apply rollers to my virtually straightened hair. Then came the hairspray, at least half a bottle of Aquanet. Reapplying that same pink hairnet and sitting under the hood of my hairdryer until my ears were frying. Well, now you can see why my hair took an hour and my makeup did too. But I was happy to do it because this was my creative world in which no one else had any input, and the positive feedback I got from it meant that there was no need for interference in this one very particular select area of my life. Then my mind went to remembering a red and white plaid circle skirt I had made and was very proud for matching the plaid at the seams. I don't remember exactly what I wore on top, but since red was one of my favorite colors, I must have chosen a red sweater versus a white one to go with the skirt. I really looked like a schoolgirl when I bounced in to meet Jack Good, the producer of Shindig. My dad picked me up at lunchtime to take me to ABC Studios on Prospect and Talmadge in East Hollywood. He was so angry with me when I got into the car because I didn't look the way I should in his eyes. Listening to my intuition intensely, I tuned him out. And we silently drove to the audition. We passed through the security gate at ABC TV and were directed to stage 3, where the audition was being held. Sitting next to me at ABC was a really cute guy named Bobby Sherman. Bobby whispered in my ear and asked me how old I was. 17, I replied. He continued, I'm telling them I'm 18, but I'm really 21. I felt honored that he was honest with me. Who would have dreamed that Bobby would end his career of being a teen idol and become an EMT and later be hired by the Los Angeles Police Department to teach EMT and become a police officer himself? I now know him as Captain Bobby Sherman, just newly retired after a long career being a public servant. His honesty with me that day prevailed through his first, second, and third careers. Let me share a story with you that he recently shared with me. Before he retired, Bobby was still in uniform and out on patrol arresting someone, a woman, for DUI. He told me that while he was putting the handcuffs on her, she turned around and saw his badge. She cried out, "I used to watch you on TV." I went in with my father to meet Jack Good, a zany British man who wore a derby. He was so jolly and asked me to sing. On this occasion, I was prepared with a recording of a background track that I could sing with. The song I had chosen was my Capitol record, Blowing Out the Candles. He really liked me and with a big grin asked me what artist I liked. I mentioned Dusty Springfield and Dionne Warwick. He looked at me with a twinkle in his eye and called me Cover Queen. Jack went on to tell me that the Smothers Brothers TV show was off air and the network needed a replacement. Shindig would fill that void. Soon afterward, Maury received the call for me to appear on the show's premiere. Shindig's premiere was September 16th, and so I had plenty of time to join Dick Clark's Caravan of Stars Tour on July 18th for the rest of July and early August, with headliner Gene Pitney and a new group out of Detroit and Motown, the Supremes, Diana Ross, Mary Wilson, Florence Ballard. Hey, they were the new sensation in America with their hit, Where Did Our Love Go? On this tour, they were performing their hit as well as their most recent release, Baby. Every night, audiences went wild for their music and the way they looked. This was the era of black artists transitioning the traditional R&B blues appearance associated with soul music to a more gentrified, quote-unquote, white fashion statement. Certainly the audience we played to, certainly in the South, were predominantly white, and they were most receptive to this new sound coming out of Detroit. Night after night on the 21 days that I stayed on the tour, they closed the first act. The Shirelles, the Crystals, and the Cookies were also on tour. The Crystals sang their hits Da-Do Run Run and He's a Rebel, and the Shirelles, Jerry Goffin and Carole King's masterpiece, Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? Those girls' approach to how they delivered an image to the audience was much more traditional with their styles and hairdos. There was clearly a cultural divide between the Supremes and them, of which I was keenly aware. Nevertheless, I found all of them to be sisterly, including Lala Brooks of the Crystals. All the girl groups were the surf band, the Ripcords, singing their #1 hit, Hey Little Cobra. Bruce Johnson and Terry Melcher were the brains and voices behind the Ripcords, who chose not to tour. Richie Rodkin, the lead singer for the touring Ripcords, is in my life now and has invited me on several occasions to perform my beach party songs with the Ripcords' new band. I'm very fond of his guitar player Mitch Sector and pianist Amy Lynn, who are of very high integrity and always well rehearsed when I show up at these events. It makes a huge difference after 50 years when you're asked to perform that the musicians are prepared. Deke Dickerson, a guitar virtuoso, has been invited by me on several occasions to perform some of my surf songs. Quite honestly, he knows them better than I do. Every little nuance of the record, So Do the Zonk, is in his memory bank. I love working with him. Without pity can do. Gene Pitney's song Town Without Pity was #1 in 5 countries during this tour. His jockey-like size amazed you when his thunderous voice rang out. Everyone was in love with Gene Pitney. I recall one time when we all had to sleep on the bus while we were driving through the Appalachian Mountains during monsoon season. Sheets of rain came pouring down as the bus driver anxiously navigated his way through narrow mountain roads. Mr. Pitney climbed up into the luggage rack, laid down on his back like a sphinx, and fell asleep. My dad captured his image on film, and that's in my book, Pop 60s. Major Lance danced his hit The Monkey Time and thrilled all the white kids who were up on the latest dance. Mike Clifford never failed to croon his Too Close to Kathy, always showing up wearing an ascot. My personal favorite was the Itsy Bitsy Teenie Weenie man himself, Brian Hyland. All on one bus were the gypsies on Dick Clark's Caravan of Stars Tour. Another bus followed with all the gear and the house band. Dick Clark himself loved the girl groups, and the chocolatier the better. On one particular night on the bus, I was not in a deep sleep at all. I had these gigantic rollers in my hair wrapped in a scarf to preserve my flip hairdo, keeping me up. Besides the fact that high humidity in the night air made it very difficult to sleep. I heard a little bit of a commotion behind me, and when I turned around, in the shadows, I saw Dick Clark sitting in the very back of the bus with one of the Shirelles sitting on his lap. Well, thank you, Dick, for this lesson in the birds and the bees. Dick was no snob. He was really a fan. I think you have to be in awe of talent, but of course his talent shone through as well as he showcased talent on American Bandstand, and now actually living together on the road. His affinity for rock and roll and performers was the impetus for him to basically live the life, travel on the bus, sleep in third-rate hotels and motels because of his commitment to the music. Dick always showed me genuine respect and admiration for my singing and never abused his privilege with me. My short leash held by my dad was like being guarded by a bulldog with a spiked collar and a precautionary growl. Besides, I was the Dr. Pepper girl. He had a vested interest as well in the company. To this day, Dick Clark Production has the sponsorship of Dr. Pepper, a 50-plus year run. Diana Ross was 20 and chaperoned by her mom, who was called Mama Supreme. Brenda Holloway, another artist, was 18 and had her mama too. I was the youngest, and of course, Maury was glued to my side. We rolled into Oklahoma City to do a concert at the baseball stadium. The summer heat was literally wreaking havoc with all the girls' hair. So much heat and humidity created the need to have hairpieces or wigs. The Supremes and I were in the dugout locker room, preparing ourselves for the show. I was wrapped in a big towel. Diana saunters over to me and says, "Do you want to hear something?" I said, "Sure." Then she called Mary and Florence together around the portable record player she had plugged in on the counter next to all the wigs. A 45 with the white label, meaning it was for promotion, spinned on the record player. "Baby, I need your lovin', got to have all your lovin'," streamed out of the speaker. Diana said, "This is a hit." I looked at the label to see who the artist was. The Four Tops, their first record and a real chart buster. South gets hot and sticky. Close quarters on the bus just didn't allow for much airspace. Sometimes the air conditioning on the bus didn't circulate well enough, and everyone would say, "Open the windows!" Hot and steamy air would flow in, but like children, many would extend their arms and even heads out the window. Then I'd hear a man's voice with a thick southern accent say, "I want some ice," pronounced ice. That sure broke the monotony and tension from living like sardines. A Dr. Pepper exec was present on the tour as well, safeguarding the company's investment, me. As we were rolling into Roanoke, Virginia, one hot afternoon, the attitude on the bus got silly. Some folks acted a bit delirious from the heat and humidity and started splashing cologne, a sweet and sickening smell mixed with perspiration. Oh, a guy yells out the window as we're pulling into a Holiday Inn, "Today, Roanoke. Tomorrow, the world." Dick Clark Caravan of Stars was a big hit with the audiences in whatever city we rolled into. Now it was St. Louis. First we tried to check into a hotel that rejected us because we were a mixed crowd. That is, racially mixed. 2 more attempts to register at different hotels failed. The 4th hotel finally accepted us for the night. After checking in, we had to head over to the Fox Theater where that night's performance would take place. Our bus drove up to the entry where a manager-type person told us we could not enter through the front. Again, it was because we were a mixed group, colored, must enter through the back door. Well, usually there is a stage door entrance in a theater like this, so it didn't seem unreasonable to me, except for the derogatory statement about African American people. In my teenage brain, I thought we were all one. St. Louis definitely demonstrated its Southern mentality in the early 60s. This was another confirmation that really gave me the empathy and a taste for what it was like to be in a racially segregated situation that treated a human being as a second-class citizen. The fact that this was the 4th hotel we went to before we were accepted was not indicative of 4 stars. When I returned to the hotel and turned on the bathroom faucet to brush my teeth, I was greeted by a red beetle cannonballing out of the running water. Turning back the covers, there were more bugs in the bed. Of course, Maury was there with me in the same room, sharing a room with my dad, never proved to be very comforting. Even when those bugs were crawling around in the bed and it was time to turn out the lights, he would only comment, it's okay," and tried to make light of it, telling me it was only for one night. There really wasn't any recourse for me, so I just had to kind of swallow my fear and conform to the conditions that were chosen for us. For my dad, the time he spent in the Army toughened him up. I remember seeing pictures he took during World War II when he was a photographer in the armed services. He had captured a street scene of a Japanese soldier decapitating a Chinese soldier with a sword. Literally, the body was standing and the head was rolling several feet away on the street. Visions and experiences like that likely put these little bedbugs into perspective for him. But he lacked a sensitivity toward me and my feelings about how creepy it was in that room. Close quarters and compatibility. We were all on the same mission to sing and make people happy. All of us had that in common. It was the glue that held us together. Some went on to stardom, and most carried on their lives committed to entertainment in some capacity. Recently, I met up with Lala Brooks from the Crystals, who were on this tour. Lala is a sweet and sassy lady, and it was nice to reacquaint. I also saw Diana Ross at the department store Barney's one day in Beverly Hills. She was all bundled up in a white suede parka and boots. I walked over to her and told her that we had spent 21 days on a bus together for Dick Clark. Her eyes drifted into her mental Rolodex, searching for that time so long ago. For her, after all her stardom, it was a difficult task to extract that memory. We had a moment together, and she smiled at me like, "Okay, girl, you're a member of the club. You know, the Girls Singers Club." I also reacquainted with Mary Wilson at a celebrity autograph show. We exchanged our contact information, and lo and behold, I received an invitation from her to go to an event starring Darlene Love. Mary wanted me to come up to her hotel room and help her pick out some accessories for what she was wearing. Mary's a very generous woman, always giving up her time. After Darlene performed, we went backstage, and what a surprise! Darlene recognized me And when we embraced, she said, "Everyone, this is the Dr. Pepper girl. Hey, Donna, let's do a reunion of Shindig."
Only because we knew this fellow was going to be with us, the fellow who has the song about the bikini, which incidentally is, depending upon how you look at it, the hottest or the coolest record in the country right now, the biggest thing around, more people asking for this one. Very handsome young man does it, and check the girl in the bikini. It's called the Itsy, Bitsy, Teenie, Weenie, you know, Brian Hyland.
Artists have a timeless quality. And you, my dear Brian Hyland, are definitely one of those artists. I heard you sing Lonely Teardrops to Jackie Wilson. Oh, my God. I was totally blown away. So, welcome to Love the Secret Weapon podcast.
Thank you, Donna. And it's great to be on your podcast.
Thank you for volunteering to be part of this venture, you know, of when we're all kind of incubating in this climate of change, and you're well, I hope.
Yes, I'm healthy, and I've been lucky with that my whole life, that I've never really gotten seriously ill or anything anything really bad happening, and so I'm one of the lucky ones, I guess.
So wonderful. Well, you know, that's how the stars line up. So I'm glad you appreciate it.
Yeah.
So do you want to just jump in there and let's talk about our experience on the Caravan?
Yeah, sure. That's fine with me. I mean, do you remember riding on the bus, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know, one of the things, like when you were on the bus, then from that point on, they always had a cooler full of Dr. Pepper on the bus.
Of course, because Dr. Pepper was sponsoring the tour.
Right, and so that was, everybody appreciated that, by the way.
So that's kind of why I was inserted into the Caravan. All the other artists were either up and coming or established like yourself. And I remember you telling me a story about how the Supremes, because this was the Supremes' first tour.
Right. Dick Clark was always bragging about that. And, I mean, in a certain way, you know, in Dick Clark's way of bragging. Anyway, so what happened was Dick Clark wanted Brenda Holloway, who had a song called Every Little Bit Hurts. And so he called Berry Gordy in Detroit and asked if they would be available to do a tour. And so he said, yeah, they'll do it. Brenda Holloway will do it. But we have this new group, and they have a new record coming out. And it came out like that week. And it's called Where Did Our Love Go? And this group is called the Supremes. And so if you take Brenda Holloway, then you got to take the Supremes too. So that was a total lucky break for Dick Clark.
That's so amazing. I know. I remember being on the bus with, I was 16 years old, and so I needed a chaperone, and my adopted father, who was also my manager, was traveling with me. And then Diana Ross's mother, Mama Supreme, I called her, was on the bus as well. And you were already on your own, right? Or you were able to travel?
Yes, I from the very beginning, when I first got into the music business, I started off with a vocal group, and we brought a demo up to Sandy Kay's office. And so they said, someone told us to go there. They said, looking for singers. And so we went up there as a group, and they said, they listened to the demo, and then they said, well, we like the way that you sing, but we're not looking for a group. So in that instant, I became a solo artist. That was in the Brill Building in New York City. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
So anyway, so that was, from that point on, then I was kind of just on my own, and I dealt with it, and it kind of changed my life, because when you're with a group, you can always kind of hide behind the group and say, he did that, he hit that wrong note or stuff like that.
No one to blame.
Right, but on your own, you take responsibility for everything. And so it was a great experience, and it was a great thing that happened right at that point too, because and then about 6 months later, I recorded that song. I recorded a song actually starting off. I'll just reiterate something that while I was there at Sammy K's office, I worked up there for a while with the arranger and cut some demos, and one of the demos was a song called Rosemary, and, which actually was the name of my first wife, my only wife actually. Well, and I recorded that song, and then they were looking to do another song, and they were kind of hesitant, and then that song came up. Itsy, Bitsy, Teenie, Weenie, Yellow Polka-Dot. And the writers brought it up to the record company, and it took off. And
what
I
recorded
it. And, yeah,
it's a classic. And you really must admit that when your light shines, you stood out, and those people recognized it.
Well, I was just being myself. And I wasn't trying to, because when we were up there, playing it for the arranger there, we were just as a group. And then it stunned me kind of, when they said that. But I guess the stars were in alignment for me that day.
and so, any little cute stories about being on the tour?
I remember on that tour and a couple of other tours that I did with Gene Pitney and me and myself, we would room together to save money. Dick Clark didn't pay for the hotels. They made the reservations, but they didn't pay for the hotel. So it was a big deal, So I saved a lot of money that way. And plus Gene was a nice guy, and I always got along with him good. And but I can remember just being on the bus and just going from city to city and how grueling it was at certain points when we did a show and then drove all night to the next city and then checked into a hotel, stayed that night, and then did the same process over and over again, like you'd stay every other night pretty much in a hotel. So,
I remember Gene Pitney, who is about the size of a jockey, was sleeping in the luggage compartment in the bus.
That's right. He did. He liked it up there. He did. And he said, "Hey, you ought to sleep up there too." And so I tried it one time and just getting up into there, and it was terrible. It was like hot and the smoke and everything because everybody smokes cigarettes, and so I didn't go for it.
That's funny. That's funny that you say that, because the one memory I have is of Mary Wilson of the Supremes smoking. It was like, she had such a beautiful voice, and she was such a lovely lady. And, well, I don't know how old. I think they were probably in maybe 19 or 20 at the time. And how old were you?
Well, that would have been, this was 1964 we're talking about, right?
Right.
So I would have been 21. Then,
21, so you didn't need a chaperone. Okay, because I just remember myself and Diana Ross having her mom, and I'm thinking Brenda Holloway might have been 17 or 18, and she might have had a chaperone as well.
That's possible.
Yeah, and then everybody else, was just like a big family, like a surrogate family for a while.
It was great, and I really miss all my old pals and, girls and guys from those times and those tours. And luckily, we have like the cell phones and the internet, and we have Facebook and things like that, so we can kind of keep in contact with people that are still around, actually.
Yeah.
And it's great. I really enjoy that.
Well, I have one other memory. Maybe this will spur you on. I remember being in Oklahoma City and in a baseball dugout. So it was in a baseball stadium, and I think it was a daytime or afternoon concert. And, there were so many people. The concerts usually lasted, about 3 hours or so.
Yeah.
And Gene at the time, I think he was #1 in 5 countries. So he went on. He was the last one that went on.
Yeah.
And there would be an intermission. Anyway, I was in the dugout getting ready, with the Supremes. Actually, the 4 of us were all in the shower at the same time, and out, there were tables and some mirrors set up for us, and I remember walking out of the shower in my towel, and I saw 3 styrofoam heads with wigs on them, and and the girls, came out of the shower wrapped in towels as well. And then Diana Ross, before she did anything, she grabbed a portable record player, plugged it in, and she said, "Come on here, I want to play something." And she was really excited, and she plugged it in, and she put on a 45,
right?
And I started hearing, "Baby, I need your loving, got to have all your loving." And she was playing me a preview of the 4 Tops, telling me, "This is going to be such a big hit."
Wow, that's fantastic. That's a great story.
So, you were on the tour much longer than I. I was only on for 21 days. I had a lot of work for Dr. Pepper to do, and so you were on for a whole season?
Well, I was just looking at that on the internet. You can look that up. The Dick Clark Tour, the Caravan of Stars Tour, 1964. And there was a summer part of it, which was probably that part right there that we're talking about. Then it went on into the fall, and that was another one. And that started, I think, in November.
Uh-huh.
And that was the second part of that an extension of that tour. Yeah.
Well, I understand that you and I have something very serious in common.
Yeah.
You didn't know this, but on November 22nd at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I was in a hotel in Dallas for Dr. Pepper, getting ready to be introduced as the Dr. Pepper girl to 2,000 franchisers all over the country. They were going to be playing my commercials for the first time to all these people, and then I was supposed to perform. Now, as I was getting ready in my hotel room, I was watching television, and I saw President Kennedy in his convertible driving right by the hotel I was in, turning the corner, and then I heard the gunshots.
Wow. So
you were there too, weren't you?
Yeah, we were going to play that night, and it's funny you should say that because I haven't heard anybody tell that about the soda convention. And so Dick Clark did a lot of wheeling and dealing to get to be in Dallas on that day for that convention of Dr. Pepper and Pepsi and I guess the other ones. And anyway, so when we got there, we drove all night from Wichita. We drove all night, and it rained all night. Got down there and checked into the hotel, and then I heard somebody saying, "Oh, the president's going to be here." And so I said, really? And they said, "Yeah, a couple of blocks from here. Just got to go up there. You can walk up there from here." So I got my camera. I walked up there with a couple of the Dovels, and we walked up. And I think Myron Lee and his band was on that tour, and so we walked up there and we waited, and then we heard like a roar kind of getting closer and closer. And then we saw the motorcade coming by and the motorcycles. And then all of a sudden there was President Kennedy and Jackie. And I was on the side of the street. So where her Jackie Kennedy's side, and I couldn't, I saw her real clear, but I could see John Kennedy's hair. That's about it. Then they went by and, and I guess a couple of blocks down the line, they made that turn into Dealey Plaza. And at that point, I was in a store. I think I was buying a pair of socks or something. I don't know. And everybody all of a sudden was like a hush, and everybody was up around this TV up in the front, just like you said. And then they announced that he'd been shot, and they were taking him to the hospital, to Parkland Hospital.
Yeah. I that was a time in history that still I question. But emotionally, I still have tears in my heart over that incident because no one's perfect. Not one president was ever perfect, but what he symbolized to me was like a change in the air and a new way of doing things. And it was so parallel to the 60s that I related to, you know, that period of time of change, of people exploring and almost a sense of community with so many people coming together, festivals and concerts and loving the same music. And, you know, it was just a really special time. And Love the Secret Weapon podcast is really all about looking at that period of possibly the seeds that were planted that are now coming to fruition, where so many people like you and I have survived, and we still have those seeds in us, those seeds of love and togetherness and of union, which are just so vitally important these days.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny that a year earlier, right in the, and I guess it was in November, and I was on a tour with Tony Orlando. Mm-hmm. And Tony, and it was during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh,
I don't remember exactly what month that was, but I guess you can figure that out. And so
one of our listeners may tune in and comment.
Yeah. And so I remember how, with John Kennedy, how he, and everybody was like real nervous. I remember leaving Chicago. We were going to Iowa to do a gig out there with me. It was just Tony and myself in a band. And, so as we're leaving Chicago, I thought, man, I'm really glad to get out of Chicago and to bomb Chicago. That'd be one of the first places. And sure enough, you know, like 2 days later, they solved it. You know, they and boats turned around. You know, the ships turned around, and that was, I thought that was a master stroke that they did there with that, the way they solved that.
Well, thank you for your insight. Yeah, it almost seems innocent, you know, compared to where we are now, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. You're right.
Well, I would love to ask you a question per our theme, and I wanted to ask you what, when, how, and who was your Love's a Secret Weapon?
Okay, well, I've thought about that when we talked the other day, and so I've had a little time to think about it. And I thought that the secret weapon for me, when I was working, the secret weapon was a song, and I wrote this song with Del Shannon, and it's called "Could You Dig It?" And recently I was going over some lyrics that I had written back then, and I came across that. And at the time when we wrote that song, it was just another song, and we thought, oh, this is a pretty good song. And when I looked at the lyrics, it's actually like a marriage proposal to my girlfriend, Rosemary, and we got married later that year. And in a way, the lyrics just fall into that whole thing. And so that was my musical secret weapon.
Oh, that's so beautiful, darling. And I understand that you had a very, very long marriage.
Yes, I did. We got married in 1970, and my wife, Rosemary, passed away 2018 in December, and she got the flu, and it went into pneumonia, and that was it.
What a precious, precious, precious life you must have experienced with her.
It was. We were very happy, and it was us against the world. We have one son, Bodie, and now, and the three of us travel all over, everywhere together. And Bodie played drums for me on stage. He still does. And Rosemary played percussion. She had maracas, tambourines, and she handled a lot of the business type things
Yes.
with promoters, and she'd call up the bands up before we got to the different cities, and make sure that they knew set list and all stuff like that.
Well, that's another thing we have in common because my son is a drummer as well.
Wow, that's great.
We'll have to share that at a future date.
Oh, that's fantastic. And being a drummer, I watched him when I first started taking him on the road. At first, I would bring him up on stage, and when I was singing Polka-Dot Bikini, and he'd say 2, 3, 4, tell the people, and he got into it. He'd get a hand mic, and he was only like 8 years old.
Oh my God,
and,
that's so sweet.
So then I noticed that he was always, when we were backstage, he was always watching the different drummers that we worked with. And so I said, yeah, I want to get a set of drums. So I got him this set of drums, which a drummer told me a type of drums to get him, which were Remo drums. And they make them, it's cut down size for kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's a good quality drum. He said, if you get him regular drums, they'll be discouraged because it's hard to hit the kick, the kick drum and the hi-hat and all that. But if he starts off on that, he can, he'll be encouraged and it'll give him confidence. So we did that, and it worked out pretty good.
That's fantastic. And so he's been a musician his entire life?
Yes, yeah.
I'm so glad. I mean, when you recognize a talent and you allow that being your son as a child to recognize that he knows what he loves, and then point him in that direction and give him the tools to be able to cultivate his interest. And here it became his profession. So, Brian, may I say this has been an incredible pleasure reuniting with you, dear. And I wish you all the best in the future, and I look forward to our friendship.
Thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure for me to be on your podcast. And I'd like to say hello to all the listeners all around the world. And take care.
God bless you, darling.
Thank you.
How great to hear from Brian Hyland in the interview that you conducted with him, Donna, about the Caravan of Stars Tour.
Oh, he's wonderful, and I am so thrilled that we can honor him on his birthday, November 12th. So everyone shout out and say hello and happy birthday to Brian Hyland. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. And, he still, it's kind of incredible, when you get to be in your 70s, that your voice and your vitality holds up, for those of us that experience that and beyond. I mean, Tony Bennett in his 90s and so but he just released a record, and his voice is rich and strong, and just a lovely man. Had a wonderful time speaking with him. And then, just by coincidence, have you ever seen The Heartbreak Kid, the movie?
The Heartbreak Kid with Charles Grodin,
with
I
Ben
think.
Stiller.
Oh, the new one.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Ben
Right,
Stiller.
no, I haven't.
So when you watch that movie and you listen for Gypsy Woman.
Of course, one of Brian Hyland's biggest hits, and one of the cool things of listening to him in the interview is it kind of made me go back, because I've always really enjoyed Brian's music, but going back and actually listening to some of the stuff, once you'd sort of done the interview, of course people think of, Itsy Bitsy, Teenie, Weenie, Yellow Polka-Dot Bikini. I'm very proud of myself for getting that one out. And Sealed with a Kiss. But what I found really interesting is when you asked him that great question that you ask anyone that you speak with about, who or what is their secret weapon. And he mentioned a song in particular that he had done with Del Shannon called Could You Dig It? And he said it was almost like a love letter or a proposal to his wife, Rosemary.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's a wonderful song that if anyone does want to listen to it, I hadn't heard it, but of course that was all around the time that he was working with Del Shannon, right around the time of Gypsy Woman and Lonely Teardrops. And they were working together on a whole range of material, including Gypsy Woman. And so to hear that, it's a really cool song.
Yeah, and the guitar playing, just the production, the arrangement, and his performance it's pretty timeless.
Absolutely. And I think it kind of leads in, really. It was, first of all, I mean, before we do go into the Caravan of Stars, I think the idea when Brian was talking about actually being in Dallas at the same time as you during President Kennedy's assassination, that's something I had never heard before.
Yeah, and coincidentally, either had I.
Yeah, and the fact that he was aware of the bottlers conventions going on at the time, because I think Dick Clark, who of course
That's right.
worked with Dr. Pepper, obviously was looking for sort of some promotion for the tour and the music. So yeah, really interesting stuff. But
it didn't sync up.
I think
it didn't sync up because obviously I was there, and all the executives of Dr. Pepper were there. And when I was there for probably 2 nights and 3 days, and there was never, well, obviously the incident, the assassination, obviously, overshadowed anything else for me. But yeah, there was, I don't recall. Well, certainly he wasn't invited to the ball. I never saw him there. Oh my goodness!
It's okay. We'll send him a carton of Dr. Pepper or something, because he did talk about that when you were on the buses for the Caravan of Stars tour. How they were furnished with Dr. Pepper because, of course, the sponsorship of the event. But take the listeners to these buses, because I think when people think of tour buses these days, they think of the giant, entourage of tour buses. This kind of wasn't exactly what you guys were traveling on.
It was Dr. Adam, I would need therapy to explain just being on and actually the seats recline, so it's perfect, for a patient to be analyzed on one of those buses. And you'd be very busy because you'd go up and down each aisle, each row, and
speaking to each one of them.
And how interesting.
and finding Gene Pitney in the luggage rack. I mean, that's just an image if you've ever thought of it.
Very much was like a Greyhound style. These were buses, and there was absolutely no luxury to them, especially if the weather was, so to speak, inclement. When we were driving through the what do you call the Blue Ridge Mountains, and on those 2-lane highways with just drenching rain, and the bus driver all night long, and the bus driver basically is the only one awake. Well, you never know. There might have been a little commotion in the back of the bus, but
yes,
but
just a little commotion.
Yes, but I was always sitting next to Maury, and he was always my chaperone. And then across the way, there was always one representative from Dr. Pepper traveling with me. So I had my bodyguards, and and all of the other acts. Basically by the time the show is over, because we'd travel sometimes twice a day. A day, and then to break it up, then we'd stay overnight in some sort of a lodging rather than trying to stay on the bus. So yeah, that it was. Of course, we were all pretty young. I mean, I would say that Dick Clark probably was the senior of the whole tour by maybe 10 years or so, and or maybe 10, 15 years. And everybody, when you're performing, you have such an adrenaline high, and and then once you've prepared, and then you perform, and then you come down from that, you really just want to kind of hunker into your own little cocoon and regenerate for the next one, especially if you're doing 2 cities in one day.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. So what did a typical day look like? So let's say, you roll in on the bus at, I don't know what time would be a
It would
general
probably be
time.
morning. You'd drive all night
Yeah.
and get there in the morning and be able to refresh yourself. I mean, obviously, if you didn't check into a place, there was no place to shower. Although in Oklahoma City, that was a very vivid memory that Diana Ross and Florence and Mary and I, the four of us, were in the dugout at the stadium, and we got to shower, and that didn't happen every day unless you were checking into a motel or a hotel. And I picked up the tour in the summer in the South, and so it's very hot and humid. So you'd want to splash something like Dr. Pepper on you, not to get too sticky, but just to sweeten yourself up a little bit.
I've never heard of it used as a cologne, but why not?
It very well could be. I think you wouldn't want to taste it that way, but it would do well in alcohol, I'm sure. But that one experience of being in the dugout and being wrapped in towels and coming out and seeing those styrofoam heads that the Supremes had with their wigs, sitting along this counter. And basically what you're in is a baseball dugout, I mean, that's what you're in. Yeah. And it has a very kind of male ambiance. So to have females there is unusual. But Diana Ross, somehow she pulled this out of her hat. She had this little record player that she plugged in and put on a 45, of the Four Tops, Baby, I Need Your Lovin', and and she was promoting it. She was like, you got to hear this. And, she called over to me and, I'm wrapped in a towel. They're wrapped in towels, with their wigs staring us in the face. And, it was just a moment. It was a moment. And then for her to say, this is going to be a hit, and of course it is. And it's still one of our favorites,
Yeah, and this was around the time that their own hit, Where Did Our Love Go, was just, hitting its stride at the time as well for them. But when you talk about, being in the dugout, because I think also what's important to remember is a lot of the places you performed would have been places like, outdoor stadiums like a baseball stadium or auditoriums, or even I'm guessing college or high school gymnasiums.
Well, they were theaters, and like in St. Louis, I recall there was a theater, like a really beautiful kind of antique looking theater, one of the old theaters in America, and I would say that mostly for Dick Clark and the tour, whoever was starring on the tour, because there was a rotation of people, that they wanted a larger arena for the most part, so that they could obviously be more profitable. So outdoor stadiums definitely were the way to go for that. I don't recall doing anything in a high school gymnasium or anything like that. It was
sure.
I only recall doing, outdoor facilities as well as theaters.
And in a given day, might it be that you do one or even two shows, so something in the afternoon, something in the evening?
Afternoon or an evening,
and then back on the bus. Yeah, absolutely. And there's some great photos in your Pop 60s book, particularly of the tour. Some really great color photos. Not so much of there's obviously pictures on the stage and there's pictures of people backstage, but some of the cool photos at a motel, I think in Oklahoma, in color, of a whole range of the artists just relaxing by the pool or being in the motel.
I had no idea that Maury climbed on the roof of one of the motels. I had no idea, and because the Dr. Pepper rep was sitting with me, and and I guess my eyes were on what was going on in the pool. I had no idea Maury left to go stand, climb up on top of a roof and take these shots. But that's the kind of photographer he was. He liked candid photography, and he didn't really ask people to pose that often, and that's kind of the beautiful part about it, to see people in action. And when you see Diana Ross on the shoulders of one of the ripcords in a southern,
Yeah.
environment in this early mid 60s. And that was foreboding. And, just to even be in the same pool together.
Well, that's what I wondered about, because, of course, in your reading, you talk about having to enter the places where everyone was performing, from the back entrance, or being refused motel lodgings, and yet you see these photos and everyone is in the pool together. It's staggering to think of this time where these artists, these black artists in particular, were just so popular and so the crowds went wild for them during this Caravan of Stars tour. But what was being dealt with behind the scenes with this segregation.
It was at the height of it, and I really don't have an answer for it, but that was a special, unique situation where wherever we stayed at that particular time, allowed it to happen. There was no interruption, and what a happy feeling, nobody on the tour cared, nobody on the tour felt discriminated upon. The only times they did is, we all did, is when we entered an environment that, was very oppressive.
Yeah.
And that one incident in St. Louis, at this really kind of shabby place that we ended up at, and that was including Dick Clark. I have never in my life had that experience of bed bugs and cockroaches coming out of water faucets and things. It's like horrifying, and yet
it's something out of a horror film.
Oh yeah,
really.
It was just horrifying, turning on the water and and this giant cockroach pours out of the faucet. But again, in my personal experience, since I shared my room with my dad, that he again kind of sloughed it off and just like grin and bear it, and there's no choice.
And it's interesting what I know Brian was saying in terms of the actual lodgings and how not necessarily the tour kind of paid for some of that. But it is interesting, as you say, that Dick Clark also was staying at these places. It's not like he dropped everyone off and it's like, okay, I'm going to the you know what I mean? Like, I can't think of a particular hotel, but he wasn't out there too. He was on the same bus and he was in the same motel rooms.
Yeah, Adam, that's a very interesting subject. I've always thought about this in terms of going back to the Greek theater. Greeks, and I'm talking, 3,500 years ago, the original amphitheaters, where the amphitheaters in Greece were designed for healing. Audience would assemble, but the actual stage had these chambers under the stage for patients with mental issues, that the play was written to assist with. And so the patients would, under the stage, to hear the actors, play out what the various mental issues were. And they could hear, what was going on, and could hopefully benefit from it. Well, to me, that is putting a performer and a viewer on the same level. But how many, how many theaters the stage, is either above an audience that's standing on the ground looking up. So, there's a discernible, difference, kind of like turning the performer into an idol. And contrary to that, the stage that's down below and the audience that rises. And the best seats in the house is when you're at eye level with the performer.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you say this, because I think it leads in quite, because how was the setup in some of these venues in Caravan of Stars?
They were all varied. Sometimes the stage was above.
Yes.
Especially in outdoor stadiums where they were sports arenas, the seats just went up like bleachers, and you were down on the ground, but the stage was elevated. And there was a distance, the audience wasn't on top of you. as they would be in a theater, in a more confined space. But you don't have that
And certainly,
equality. That's what I'm getting at. You don't have that equality. And so many performers, I would say, that really love connecting with their audience, find a way of creating that equanimity between the audience, so that the audience, they might scream at the Beatles or, have their reactions, but there is such a feeling of equanimity, heart to heart connection, Elvis, you name it, with the audience, that it's a very, very unique kind of communication, versus a performer that puts themselves above, or in a situation where, let's say, what you're talking about is diminishing the value of the performer, and because back in the day, an actor wasn't considered something of value. Sarah Bernhardt had to start her own theater, and on and on, to this day, how many, well, I would say maybe not in the Corona times, but, normally only the top tier of performers, actors, musicians, have that kind of privileged to be honored and to be paid well. And so many are still struggling to be appreciated, in the way they're treated and also the way they're paid.
Yeah, the life on. I think you're providing a real interesting insight into the life on tour, and this idea, I find really interesting of that equality between audience and performer. I think was something that, first of all, most of the people on your tour at the time were, almost kids themselves. I mean, you were obviously the youngest, but, everyone was very young. So, I think in some ways, the audience and the performers, the age difference probably wasn't as all that much. But also it kind of fits into what I know we're going to speak about down the road, which is Shindig, and the whole idea that Jack Good formulated on that program to kind of make the audience feel a real part of the action. It's something that he pioneered on his English TV programs before he came over to the US to do Shindig, and to kind of not have that barrier so much between the audience and the performance.
Well, he is a pioneer. And also a man of complete love. And, there was no division between anyone, female, male, audience, musician, performer, James Brown, Rolling Stones, we were all there on the same level. And no one was treated any different than anyone else, which is, coming from a very spiritual place, and that's the kind of man he was.
Before we wrap up, this episode with our really great Brian Hyland interview and your memories of Caravan of the Stars, I guess what stands out the most for you on that 21 in those 21 days on tour?
I think it's about feeling like a family. Maybe the way to relate to it is when you're young and your parents send you off to camp and you don't know anybody there, and and you have this live-in experience, 2-3 weeks or however long they send you away for, sometimes the whole summer, and you would be missing home and you'd be homesick right in the beginning, but then you become a family. And that's what happens. By the end of the tour, there was that feeling. And I recall us having like a little farewell party before I left, because many of them continued on, and I had to get back to my Dr. Pepper work and everything else that I was doing. So, but we did a costume exchange and music exchange party. And I remember Lala Brooks giving me her costume to wear. And it was really fun because suddenly someone was wearing I've forgotten somebody borrowed my clothes and, emulated me, and I emulated the Crystals, and
Yeah.
everyone traded off and kind of had fun, just showing each other that, that we were paying attention and that we admired each other. And a couple of them just had a few extra drinks and had some reaction. But for the most part, everyone was pretty well behaved and had a good time. And that was a special occasion for me.
And I think with that, we might say goodbye for now, and a happy birthday to Brian Hyland again. And with that, we'll leave you with, as his first album was called, The Bashful Blonde, we'll leave you with a bit of Brian Hyland.
Yes.